Good evening, and welcome once again to the U Talk Show. I'm host. That's Kyle. I think you're Kyle, right?
Yes,
Says you're Kyle.
yes,
If you're not Kyle, we've got different problems.
yes.
Now, it's Civics Week Part 5, and I honestly think that we might have to produce a few more videos about the basics of civics and citizenship, because for many of us, it was so long ago that we learned the basics. And for many of us in our everyday lives, they simply aren't relevant. But in looking at how we solve society's problems, we do have to understand how they came to be. And understanding how our society functions is key to this. Um, Today, we're dealing with what happens when people don't agree with the law. Now, in the US, there's been an uptick of people who refer to themselves as sovereign citizens. They will argue that a person isn't a corporation, they'll argue that a corporation isn't a person, and in legal terms, they'll argue that a corporation isn't a corporation. They will argue whatever they can get their hands on that sounds vaguely like it might help. They believe that in order to be subject to the laws of a state or country, you have to consent to being subject to those laws. These people believe that they can opt out of the system. It makes for some very amusing tales from the courtroom, some very amusing tales from cops, and interestingly enough, these people are mistaken such that the tale is almost never amusing from their side. That's a pretty profound example of what happens when people don't agree with the law. But that's sort of what I'd like to cover. The law necessarily caters to the majority. There will always be people who feel that a law is unjust. Sometimes they may seek to change these laws, sometimes they will just break the laws. And you'll see in certain areas of outback Australia a Eureka Stockade flag and a silhouette of Ned Kelly's really badly assembled slitted helmet and the phrase, "When the law is unjust, resistance becomes duty." And almost certainly they're talking about making moonshine and taking meth, because those are the laws that these people feel aren't just in their case.
Is it wrong to make moonshine though? Let's at least give them
Yes,
that,
it
I reckon.
actually is.
How
It
so?
actually is. Legally
What's so bad
speaking,
about
it
that?
is illegal to distill beverages. And the reason for that
Like
is
distill.
actually, yeah,
Is
you
it
can
just
make beer at
distilling?
home, you can make wine at home. It's distilling, so making moonshine or
Ah,
rum or
I see.
vodka. And the
Why
reason for
that
that
why that
is
though? Why that why distilling though?
because when you distill alcohol, what you get isn't pure ethanol. You get fractions of alcohols. Ethanol is mostly harmless to humans, in moderation, of course, but the next fraction you get is methanol. And if you drink methanol, um, you you literally get brain damage. It kills your optic nerve.
Oh,
People have literally gone blind from drinking methanol. This is the reason that
I
when you
see.
buy methylated spirits at the hardware store, it tastes so foul because it was made into law a number of years back that these have to have an adulterant so that people don't just drink them and hurt themselves. It's quite easy to get a license to distill booze. You just have to show that you are capable of undertaking quality control procedures.
Hmm. Okay.
It's the backyard operation of a still where you can't really tell what you're getting that is illegal. And the reason that it is illegal is because it has the potential for social harm. Not by
Hmm.
people getting pissed, but by people being blinded.
Well, that's less than 3 minutes. And you've very much turned me around on that. I'm just like, okay. See, that's the I think this is actually a perfect example of kind of what you were just talking about people not understanding the law.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't quite understand the law, and now that you've given me an understanding, it makes a lot of sense.
That
It's
said,
like,
I'm
of
also
course
not
we
going
should
to
do that.
lie. The state wants their cut of taxes.
Yeah, there's that too.
That is what it is. I'm not going to lie, and I'm not going to say that there's not a financial motivation, but I am also going to say that the law is fundamentally sound.
Mm.
So
Generally speaking, I disagree with tax law, but that's a whole other story.
I disagree with rich people paying far less taxes than they should.
That's the part that I disagree with.
Yeah, did
Basically.
you hear that the folks at PricewaterhouseCoopers who were part of the double handling have
Yeah.
been put for the high jump? 8 folks got fired over that.
Oh, something actually happened this time.
Yeah, yeah. So sometimes the law works. Now, those folks at PricewaterhouseCoopers also disagreed with the law. And in the parlance of the kids these days, they fucked around and they found out. So, Kyle, you got any criminal tales? You got any family history of people who thought that maybe a particular law didn't apply to them? You can
Um,
anonymize. You can
I don't know. Let me think. See,
anonymize.
okay. See, in my immediate family, um, it was very much like we had it drilled into us from a young age, like you do the right thing, so
Yes.
there wasn't always consistency in what that meant. But the general idea was there. So,
You keep your head down, you
there's
keep your nose clean, you make an honest life.
kinda, yeah, but I mean then again, there were a few incidences. It's less it's more so I mean it's more so like justifications rather than they disagreed with the law themselves. It's more like, if this is okay because of this, you know. Um but nothing really serious or anything like that. Um I mean I have actually got another story from someone unrelated to me.
Excellent.
Um it's not what you'd expect, but here we go. So I was half in this conversation, half not. And there were these two people, an older man and woman.
Mm-hmm.
And they were talking about like parenting and childhood and stuff. And they keep in mind the older woman was from another country where culture was very different.
Yep, yep.
But the man was born here, raised here. He was one I was not expecting to agree with the statements that she made. We'll call them Bob and Jill. So, Bob, I was not expecting Bob to agree with Jill on this, and I thoroughly disagree, and the law disagrees. But Jill basically said that children are the property of their parents, like parents own children; they are property. And
Yep.
well, what came to my mind there was quite literally what the law says, which was no, parents are their legal guardians, meant to raise and help them. They are not. They don't own
Children
them.
are the responsibility of the parents, not the property of the parents.
Yes, exactly,
There's
and
this
that's
there's this
so that
perfect
was one.
Japanese phrase for this.
Mm.
There's a perfect Japanese phrase for this. We'll try and pronounce it correctly. Yeah, chigaimasu. And it's a very polite way of saying, no, that's wrong. Do better.
Yeah, actually sounded like if I could not see your face and I just heard that like just by itself, I would have had to think twice before I realized it was someone who was not Japanese saying it. So
I'll
you're
take
not
it.
half bad.
I'm sure a native Japanese speaker will cringe at that, but
Oh yeah, they
uh
probably will. They'll probably be
yeah.
like, "What the hell is this idiot saying?"
So
Um,
that's we don't see what happens there, though we can take a few educated guesses.
mm,
Um, this is sort of, I guess, a series of case studies on disagreeing with the law. I've started with the
yeah,
sovereign citizenry stuff, which I will point out that a bunch of the people who've made this idea popular in the US are now targeting marginalized communities in Australia, mostly poor outback communities, largely indigenous, with these stupid ideas.
Yeah.
Because it's like motivational speakers and mega churches. This is what they do. They give you
Mm,
this idea that they sell to you the idea that their way of seeing the world can improve your life, and they get rich off it. Um,
mm.
Now, in your case,
And they don't care about the damage that that does, because I mean, first off, it destroys social cohesion in a society. You know,
mhm.
it's the corruption of people's understanding of how society works. And
But it
you
also
know,
it also
secondly, it
does
hurts the
encourage this sort of screw you,
individuals.
I got mine mindset.
Yeah, yeah. It like it. Well, that was part of the third thing that I was going to say. Like the second thing is that it hurts the individuals because hell, they basically break the law and then get punished for it because they have this expectation based on lies. And then the third
Yeah,
one is that it encourages people to look out for number one. You know, it essentially it's a justification. And I'm gonna butcher an analogy real quickly here, or I guess a facsimile
sure thing.
in a sense. Um, but in a similar way that religion used to be, well, still to some degree today, is used as a justification for violence and other acts. In a similar way to that, you know, these ideas, you know, because religion is a cultural institution, and these ideas are kind of they're a cultural idea. You know, they don't have anything to do with a legalistic philosophy. They're just a cultural idea that's being pushed again. So one individual or a few individuals can make money while other people have their lives ruined. And so essentially what it does is it provides a an easy justification for acts which can sometimes even be quite heinous. And you know, in
Especially
that sense,
heinous.
yeah, but in that sense, I think that's why it appeals, is because it's easy justification for what people want to believe anyway.
Mashallah,
Sorry,
the
we
sovereign
just we
citizen
just
wankers are coming for you too.
sorry, I just kind of dragged this back into Psych Week for a moment.
Yeah, no,
So,
absolutely. Absolutely. These topics are interlinked because psychology, the law,
it's all
sociology,
connected,
social
man.
norms, they all tug on each other. It's
God, I
like
was just
your
literally
concept
thinking.
of the pillars of policy. These are
I was
all
literally
things
think.
which influence each other.
Yeah, I was literally thinking thumbtacks and strings. It's all connected, man. Just,
I mean, it is.
yeah, yeah.
Back to Bob and Jill. If they
Hmm.
if they, heavens forbid, came to the conclusion that you could like roll up a newspaper and hit your kid because they came home late from curfew. Um, that kid shows up to school with bruises. And
I mean,
those
I think it'd
bruises
take.
have some quiet
Can you?
questions asked in the school counselor's office. This is a situation where a government agency may be forced to intervene. It was the Department of Community Services. I think it's now called the Department of Communities and Justice.
Mm.
And what happens is a
So,
social worker would visit these parents, either of them, whichever one of them did it, and explain
mm,
that that's not appropriate. That is not how we handle things. And if they refused to take the message, we may find that the state's responsibility is to remove those children from the home for their safety. Um,
yeah,
like that
no,
is what happens when
that's
they disagree with the law.
yeah. Essentially, you get the hammer of the law just coming down on you. But you know,
Yeah, it's the carrot and the stick.
yeah, speaking of hammers and sticks, you know, I loved what you said just then, except the example, a newspaper, really. And I know this is nitpicking, but really, can you actually bruise someone with a newspaper? Is that
Yes, you
possible?
absolutely can. If you want me to demonstrate, I'll be happy to show you. I can break bones with a rolled up newspaper if I have to.
You're
Personally,
kidding.
in the case of my father, it was a very, very thick leather belt. It was one of those quarter-inch thick bastards that the German army used to issue. And that
Oh
doubled
wow.
up leaves some pretty impressive bruising, let me tell you. But I did
Wow.
actually have a story about my father disagreeing with the law, although perhaps not entirely consciously, um, which is sort of another case study. I've told you about going to Parramatta Court, right?
I have a very vague memory that you did mention this at one point, but I forget what it was about.
I'll preface this for everyone. My father, I would say God rest his soul, but there is no rest for the wicked, and there should be no rest for the wicked. Um, was a peculiar man even before this happened, but he had a series of hemorrhagic strokes. Um, so you sort of see
In
that
layman's terms, basically brain damage.
brain damage.
Okay.
When you see people who've had strokes, you see a loss of mental faculties. My father was in low level care, which is the polite euphemism for he was chucked in a nursing home so that his medical needs could actually be attended to properly.
Hmm. So what's the part
And
where he disagreed with the law?
I'm getting there. And it was his custom once a week to like head out from the nursing home because it was one where the residents could like leave and come back. And he'd go to Parramatta and go to the shops, grab the newspaper, come back. One fine day, he's walked past a car that is just parked, abandoned. He's seen it there for a few weeks and he's thought, hmm. And he's noticed the toolbox on the passenger seat. And he's just been staring at this car, sort of longingly. And a police officer has come up and said, well, what's going on here? And he said, oh, thank goodness you're here. Um, I'm trying to get into this car. I want those tools.
Is that it?
So we broadly hold that that's breaking and entering and theft.
Yeah.
There are laws against
Yeah.
those. I will remind you. My father, I will say unironically here, God bless him, decided to try and enlist a police officer to help him commit a crime. And this is sort of we're going to go into how crimes are punished in a little bit. Civics Week 2 is coming up. It will happen.
Yeah.
He went before the courts. The courts found that he was a few bananas short of a plantation, and it was determined that he should be held in a slightly more secure care facility and maybe not allowed to roam freely, unsupervised. Uh, aside from what I sincerely hope that the magistrate who oversaw that got to like head out of the courtroom after that and just finish laughing. Um, my father didn't need to go to
Yeah.
jail. My father didn't need to be fined. Certainly, he disagreed with the law in this respect, but we recognized as part of the administration of justice that his disagreement with the law was a matter of incapacity, that he could
Mm.
not agree with the law, and thus that it was
Mm.
unsuitable to try and punish him further.
Mm.
Um, yeah. Do,
Yeah.
do you see
Which,
why I tell that as an example of like disagreeing
yeah,
with the law too?
it's very interesting. Very
Some
interesting.
people are
God,
just
I love these
removed from
discussions.
reality.
Yeah.
And in that case, when they disagree with the law, we do not treat it as a moral failing. We treat it as a medical problem, usually.
Mm. All right, I think with that we'll end it because that was a very good discussion, and we've just run out of time at the same time.
Yeah,
So
I think
good
we get to
timing.
talk about the heavy shit during Justice Week.
Yeah. All right, I guess we'll
So
catch you later.
I
Thank
hope
you
this has
so
been
much for watching.
informative for everyone. Take care, y'all.